Hey guys, John here. Welcome to the second video in the Falcon series. Today we're going to be making a basic aged organ. It sounds something kind of like this. Okay, so we have a couple different macros here. We have the speed of the rotary. Then we have our drive, which totally at the top it's a little bit too much, but maybe around 70 to 80% is kind of the sweet spot for it. And then we have this key noise. Now this is something that's kind of subtle and you kind of don't really notice it when it's there. But if we turn this drive down and then we kind of listen to this key noise here, and let's really crank it, and now you're going to be able to notice what it is. So it's just a little bit of noise every time we hit a key, and this feels like it gives a little bit more character to the sound. It kind of makes it sound a little bit more aged, and it's just kind of a nice little subtlety to have, because if we don't have it, it still sounds okay and it still sounds fine. I just personally like a little bit of noise there once we hit the keys. It kind of just brings that a little bit. And this is just one of the many little subtle things of sound design where you kind of just want those tiny little screws because they all eventually add up to make something nice. And then last but not least, we have some reverb here on the macro. Okay, so let's dive into this here. So let's go to mute right over here on this part. I mean, now you technically don't have it, so that you kind of can skip over that, I suppose. So let's go here to the plus and let's add a new part, and let's change this A2 to A1. And we don't have anything set up, so we're not going to hear anything. So let's go over here to the edit page. So down over here on the oscillator key group, we're going to drag this organ here, which is going to be in this oscillator section over here under synthesis. And let's drag this down over here and make sure it covers all of the key group there. So once we play this here, we're going to be greeted with a sine wave. Now, these different drawbars here kind of function how you would expect them to. The more we pull them down, the louder they're going to get. So right now we just have one, and it's going to be at the maximum amplitude. So let's kind of bring this back over here. Maybe something kind of like this around the 5.64 area, something kind of like that. Now, if we want a harmonic to be doubled, we're going to basically reach over here for this 4. And if we want another octave, it's going to be the 2. So basically the divisions of that. And then let's reach over here for the 1. Maybe just a tiny, tiny bit of this first one here. Maybe a little bit more of the 4. Some 2. And below the 8 is basically going to be a more lower end stuff than your root note. So keep that in mind. And then these 2, 2 over 3, 1, 3 over 5, 1, 1 over 3. I kind of feel like these are going to be more so as a flavor kind of thing to your sound. And I kind of generally like this 1, 1 over 3. Just adding a subtle bit kind of makes it a little bit more nice. And this is kind of the spot where you kind of want to first kind of really carve out your initial sound of the organ. And once you kind of have that in a good spot, then you can kind of move on here. And keep in mind, each one of these harmonics has its own individual pan, so you can kind of pan these harmonics however you'd like to. But for this demonstration, we're just going to keep these at noon. We're not going to touch these. We're going to leave those alone. We also have a percussion setting over here. We can turn that on, which I personally am not too big of a fan of. I like making something like this my own, which is going to be why we're going to be diving into a different layer and so on and so forth later on in this video. Okay, so let's say we're happy with this organ sound. This is kind of the raw step of the sound, and we want to move on. So let's go up here to the layers, and keep in mind, if you don't see any of these effects, events, or mod sections over here, maybe it's one of these lights that might be off for you. You know, if you're looking for the effects, then you might want to look over here, and if this is gray, make sure to select the effects and any of these other icons if they're missing from down here so they show up for you. So under this layer here, let's go to the effects, let's click plus, and let's go down here to modulation, and then go to rotary, and let's go to default. And that gives a very cool sound right off the bat here. It's a little bit loud, so let's get to the gain. Let's kind of bring this back down here for our layer. Okay, so there's a couple of things to point out. You can choose the model down over here. For this demonstration, 122 is fine. Now we have our drive knob, which is a fantastic knob here. So this is going to be the one that we mapped to the macro in this earlier demonstration at the beginning of the video. And somewhere around 70, 80% is really kind of the sweet spot of this. Kind of around there, 77, 76%, something like that. And then we have the tremolo, which is going to be the speed knob that we're going to add at the end for our macros. But for now, 6.80 hertz is fine. I do want to bring your attention here to the horn volume and the drum volume. So take a listen to the different sounds once we remove the drum volume. And then now the horn. So for this demonstration, let's just back off the drum volume just a little bit here. Like 1.27. Sounds about okay. Now over here on the right-hand side, we have two microphones on the left and the right, and this is going to be kind of a visual demonstration of how we're going to be miking this sound through the cabinet. Now the distance is nice too, because we can always increase this if we'd like to. Maybe do like 1.15 meters or so. And then we have the width. I kind of just move this to where it feels right for you. I'm going to go with maybe 100-ish or so. And then you can mess with the angle and the skew if you'd like to. I'm not going to do this for this demonstration, but they basically just kind of angle around the microphones there. And then for the skew, it kind of just skews these here like that. It's kind of cool that you have those different options there. Okay, so now we basically have our oscillator set up. We have our core sound kind of done. We've done some small little adjustments within the rotary effect, which is very, very cool. So now, what I would like to do is maybe just EQ this a little bit, because there's some kind of lows that are kind of bugging me. And once we get to the high-end stuff like this, it can get very ear-piercing. And that's kind of a real thing with a regular organ, too. You kind of want to EQ it, or EQ it like you would a regular organ. So let's go to the plus here, and let's go down to equalizer. And for this, let's select the digital EQ, and let's just go to default here. So now we don't have any bands here or anything like that. Now we just need to click, and it's going to add one for us. So for this first one, I'm going to kind of hone in, and you might want to turn down your speakers just a little bit, or your headphones, because we're going to hone in on that really annoying pointy frequency and kind of just back that down a little bit. So something right around there. And this is kind of just a good tip as far as EQ. Once we're kind of finding what we want here with our mouse, and we're kind of just moving over for finding that frequency right, and kind of finding exactly what bothers us, instead of grabbing with your mouse and bringing it down, there's always a slight chance that our hand can move and we're going to kind of lose that frequency, then we're going to have to go back up. So whenever you're finding it, let go of that knob and then reach for the knob itself and bring down the gain, so you know exactly that you left off on that frequency, and you can just bring down the gain itself so you don't change anything by default. So just a little bit like that. So before and after, we're kind of just softening it up just a little bit. And then for the low end here, I'm just going to click another one over here. And then down here where it says peak, I'm going to select this here and go to high pass. And then right underneath where it says 6 dB, let's maybe go to like a 24 dB, something like that. And then from here, we can go to our frequency and just kind of shave off a lot of that low end stuff that we might not really want. So maybe go somewhere around there, like 89.3 hertz or so. And then a nice little thing as well, this next harmonic here, I'm going to click just a little bit here and kind of just bring that gain down just a little bit. So that's pretty much a good spot where we can leave off here. Okay, so next up, we want to add that note, right? That clicking sound once we hit a key here. Now, the thing that might trip you up here, so let's say we want to have that noise, right? And we click up here, and then we go to noise. We're going to hit this noise. It's going to be hitting our effects, right? But for this situation, this is kind of something that we do want to have, right? Because you kind of want a little bit of that aged sound in here. So this is kind of nice here if we have this little noise right over here. We can mix this in with our organ, and make sure once we have two oscillators here, this link icon, make sure to uncheck that here. So for this first noise, which we're actually going to add two here, For this first noise down over here, let's go to the note tracking right over here. Let's double click this here and hit 0. Because we don't want to change any types of pitch or sound once we hit different notes. We want the exact same thing every single time. So let's mute our organ for now. And we can always browse through these different types of sounds and see what we like the best. I kind of think something like that might be nice. So let's bring this back in for our organ and kind of just mix how we like this to sound. Because when you hear an organ, you kind of want to have that little agey kind of noise in the background as well. Maybe something like that. And now if we take it out, it sounds almost a little bit too clean, right? And A being it like this is a good way to kind of dial in the relative levels between these two oscillators. Because for this, we're kind of going for subtlety. Okay, so now comes the part where we're like, okay, we have our oscillator, we have the rotary and the EQ, we have the nice simulated noise going through these effects. This is cool. So now we want to add this clicking sound, right? And we go to plus, and then we go to noise again, right? So we click these off again. And the same problem occurs. We hear this noise for this time. We hear it through the rotary effect. It's getting EQ'd, and that's not really realistic, right? If when you hit the actual sound of the keys, it's not necessarily going to sound like it's going to be from the back of the cabinet, right, that we're miking up. So this is kind of where I want to introduce the different layer things here. So let's turn these back on for now. We have that going on here. So now over here on the list side, let's select this here, and our first layer one over here, let's double click this and let's call this organ. Just like that. Now up here at the top where there's the wrench, there's the plus and the minus. Let's select plus for a new layer, and let's double click this and call this key noise. Something like that. So now we have a brand new layer. This is all cleared out for us, and now we can kind of work in a brand new section pretty much. And if we go over here to the parts, it's still going to be in our main part. We're just using a different layer, and this is kind of where it comes in handy. So right over here where the organ is, let's mute this for now, and we hit some keys. We shouldn't hear anything, which is great. Now let's go back to our oscillators here, this kind of waveform, and then select noise, and let's drag this down over here to our noise here. So we now have our noise. Maybe we want to do something like a white noise, right? So, okay, great. So now again on the note tracking, let's double click this and hit 0. Okay, so this is cool. Let's bring down our gain a little bit. Now that kind of clicking sound isn't going to be that much frequency, so we want to add an EQ to it. So again, if any of these are hidden for you, which they shouldn't be by now, make sure to click the effect so it's lit up blue so we can see our effects lane over here. So let's select this plus here. Let's go to equalizer. Let's go again to the digital EQ and then default. So let's select a note here. And then for this peak, let's select this here and let's go to bandpass. And then maybe select 12 dB or something like that. And then we can kind of browse through the frequency knob and kind of just find the right sound that would sound good for our for the note sound or the key sound. So let's maybe do something kind of like that, like 1.71K. Something like that. So now down up here on the amp envelope, let's select this here and let's double click this and let's call this key amp env, something like that, just so we can know the difference, right? Because we select this different layer. This one now it says amp envelope for this one, and we can go down here to key noise, and now this is going to be our different envelope here. So for this here, right, we want a quick note. It's gone, it's there, it's gone, it's there, it's gone. It's a very fast noise. So let's reach down here for the sustain. Let's bring this all the way down. Now the decay is a little bit too long, and it's going to just bring this down to taste. Something like that, almost like little clicking, clacking kind of sounds. So 9.63 milliseconds, maybe 10, something kind of like that. Maybe even 8.5, something very short like that. So at this point, we can scroll up here and kind of bring back our gain. Okay, so now we have that basic key sound. Very cool. So now we can unmute this organ. and we have that in there. So later on, once we're going to be setting up our macros, this is kind of going to be the spot where we're going to add this gain knob to our macro, so we can kind of mix this into taste on the front end of the screen, just so we don't have to dive into different layers and different parts of these layers, right? So we can always have something very easy to use on our macro over here on the info in just a little bit. So basically at this point, we're pretty much set up for the most part. So now we just need a little bit of reverb here. And keep in mind, what's nice about using these different types of layers here, we don't necessarily want to add reverb to the key noise. So we go back to our organ layer here and everything starts to pop back up. So now we can go to our effects layer here and press plus, and let's go to the reverb and let's select spark verb and then default. So for here, you can definitely dial up your own type of reverb that you would like. For this demonstration, maybe we can go to something like a hall and maybe like a medium hall or something like that. I'll add a little bit of pre-delay here, maybe 10 milliseconds or so. So if this is the reverb that we like, and like I said before, you can spend some time, you can pause the video and really dial in your reverb if you'd like to. But for this demonstration, let's say this reverb is good. We like this at 41%. This is fine. So now we start working on macros. So let's rewind a little bit and kind of think what we want for the macros, right? So the first thing that we wanted here for the other one was going to be the speed. So let's go over here on the rotary, and over here on the tremolo, it's right-click this. Let's go to assign to macro and add new macro. And now our info tab, let's select the wrench, double-click this here. Let's go all caps, and then let's call this speed. Oh my goodness, I can't spell. Here we go, speed. There we go. And let's drag this to the top left, something nice and neat like that. And then it's kind of nice to have full influence of the full knob. So for this situation, I'll kind of leave it like that. To be kind of a one-to-one relationship. So, and then we look back up over here on the parts over here, and we look at this part here. So we have drive for the second knob. So let's go ahead and add that for this different part over here. So then our drive is going to be also in the rotary. So our drive is going to be over here at 77, right? So let's right click this again and then go assign to macro, add new macro. And then let's go ahead and relabel that and make it all nice and neat. Let's call this drive. And then let's bring this knob all the way over here, all nice and neat like. And then for this one, again, I kind of like it having one-to-one because I kind of like the full influence of the knob. So this is fine. We can leave that at 77. That's going to be cool. So next up, back over here on our previous one, on our info tab, the next one we had was the key noise. So back in this program over here, let's go to edit. And we want to control that different layer noise, right? So let's go back to our list here and let's select the key noise that we initially added just with this noise oscillator. Now let's go for the layer volume here. Let's right click this, go assign to macro, and let's go add new macro. Back to our info tab. Select the wrench here, double click this, and let's call this key noise. And then let's drag this up next to this over here. And then back in our other main one, the last one we had was going to be reverb. So let's go back over here. And then we know that our reverb is going to be in our first spot for our first layer over here. So let's go back to our list and then select the organ. And then let's go find our reverb here, which is going to be our spark verb. Let's click this here. And then for this situation, we want to do the mix. So let's right click this and assign a macro, add new macro. Now remember, this knob here, this mix, right? Let's say we're happy at 41%, and that's the maximum value of reverb that we want on our macro. We don't want the user or us, whoever's using this patch, to go past 41%. So in this situation, we go to info and select the wrench. Let's drag this all the way up here, and then let's call this reverb, like that. So like I said, right here, it's at 41, and this is the max value, but now the user can go all the way to the top here, and then we go to the edit, we look at our spark verb here, and then now our mix is at 100%, and our sound is washed out completely by reverb, and that's something that we don't really want. So let's select this knob here, and down over here on the modulation section, this is full influence here, so let's double click this here, and if we wanted 41, let's go 0.41 and enter. So now this value here, once it's all the way to the top at 100%, now it's going to be stuck here at 41%, just like we originally wanted. So now they have a value going all the way down to 0 if they don't want any reverb, or all the way to the maximum 100%, which reflects 41%. And and that's all going to be conveniently in this macro here. And then now we're pretty much all set up for the most part here. And we can always increase our speed. Let's check and see if these macros are all working properly. So let's take down our reverb here. Let's take down the key noise, the drive, and let's just look at the speed here. Okay, our speed seems like it's good. Let's check out our drive. Oh yeah, that's working. And then our key noise. So at 100%, this is kind of a lot, but in this situation, I kind of like having a little bit more wiggle room like this, just so if you really crank it, we can really notice what's happening. And it's kind of like when we turn something loud and we're like, okay, this is what we're focusing on. And then we kind of just tuck it in and put it in the right spot in the mix. So that's kind of generally why I would leave something like that so loud at the max value. And then last but not least, let's double check our reverb. So there we go. Let's see how close we got with both of these. Pretty close. All right, so thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something within Falcon, and this is kind of a good practice to start using different layers and kind of really just think in the sense that what else would you want to put on a different layer? Maybe you want to have some different sample, and we're going to get to sampling much later on in the course. We're going to kind of be running through different oscillators and kind of just getting into the workflow of how Falcon works and all that. So yeah, maybe some good homework if you're kind of interested in something like that is kind of just make some different patches, but make different effects racks for different layers, and kind of just make something kind of cool like that. That should be some really good practice there. And always keep in mind, if you're working on different layers, you can always mute one or you can solo one here from the list view, which is kind of nice as well. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you guys learned something, and we'll see you in the next video for the next Falcon one. Thanks for watching.